Hello, Mr. Merman. You're here early. It's nice to see you. You get to see me in my 18th century persona tonight. And as usual, I'm just going to wait a few minutes for other people to join us. Hi, Keenan. It's nice to see you again. You can say hello out there if you're on Facebook or YouTube. You can say hello. I'll see your messages right here. I'm very happy to be with you. A little less couture Mrs. Q and a little bit more um, average Mrs. Q tonight. Not very dressy, just some typical 18th century clothes, mid 18th century. Hi, Linda. Since tonight it's 1765, not too much fashionable couture tonight, just some regular day clothes. I guess it's evening, but day clothes for Mrs. Q. Just a jacket, stomacher, a skirt, and a scarf. No hat, since we're inside. Don't need a hat. So just some more low-key clothing tonight. Hope everyone is well. It's nice and warm here. It was quite hot getting dressed. I'm just going to wait a minute or two more. We have a lot to talk about tonight. I hope you'll all enjoy it. We're going to be talking about the year 1763 to 1765 and the growing feeling in at least New York and the other colonies that the government was becoming the enemy and no longer a friend. We're going to talk about two big incidents that caused people to start believing that. Two big mistakes made on the part of the crown and one on the part of a local governor to make people start suspecting that maybe the crown and the governors, let me see if I can get a good spot here, were not so friendly to the colonies after all. Hi, Una, it's nice to see you. So good to see everybody after so many years. After me being off for a year and so many people coming back to watch, I really appreciate you all being here. So tonight is, let's say it's April. The year is 1765. We're in Mrs. Q's upstairs bedroom parlor. Many homes had an upstairs private parlor like this with a bedroom fireplace. There's a fireplace back there, a couple of chairs and some windows so that people, gentlemen or ladies, could entertain family members or, their friends privately in the upstairs part of the home. This is a sort of room that only very close friends and family members would visit. Regular guests would stay in a regular parlor downstairs. Una says she likes the wing chair. I love that chair too. And that color, I think that many of us probably grew up thinking the colonial period was really drab color-wise, but it absolutely was not. The pink and green became a very popular color combination. Hi, Terry. Nice to see you too. It's so nice to see everyone. So the green and pink became a very popular color combination. The blues, the greens, the botanical colors, all very popular. So it really wasn't as dull a time period as maybe we've come to think it was. The other thing is about clothing, actually, and I've been learning a little bit more of this myself because, for many years I did reenactments in and around New York City as Mrs. Q, a wealthy merchant from New York City with really lovely clothes and fabrics, elaborate hair, however she wanted to dress, always fashionable for the time period. But I've recently joined a militia reenactment group. And of course, the ladies are all camp followers. And I don't have any clothes that plain to wear. And that's really the sort of attire I think that us as students or watching things about the American Revolution believed was the way all women dressed, with the big wool or linen skirt and the wrap jacket with the apron over it and scarf, a big scarf, and a shoulder bag of some kind or a basket, thick stockings, plain black shoes, and just very plain, maybe a bonnet or kerchief in the hair. Um, I think we all tend to think that that's the way all the women during the 18th century in America dressed. But those really are the farm women, the working class women, and the ladies who followed around the camps during the Revolutionary War. Obviously, in the cities, we see the ladies are dressed in whatever the most popular English or French couture is at the time. So we see very different differences in clothing depending on region of the country and your economic class, with the gentlemen as well. Um, Oh, a new follower from Arizona. Andrea, nice to have you, Andrea. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hope we're going to have a great time learning about 1765. So this is a more 1765 outfit for me tonight. The jacket, just the plain jacket, dark blue skirt. I have some satin lacing, which would make me a little wealthier with the satin lacing, and more of a silk chiffon scarf, which makes me a little wealthier. And of course, some hair with some jewels in my hair and some earrings. By the way, Mr. Q just got me these earrings. Aren't they lovely? It's very nice from Mr. Q. Thank you. And so a little dressed up, but not over the top. You know, some weeks I can be really over the top in the way I dress, depending on the subject and the year we're talking about. So I thought I would be a little bit more plainer and straightforward tonight. So a much plainer Mrs. Q tonight. Now, the year is, as I said, 1765. It's early April, and New York is just getting news of this, if you can see this, from the King, the Stamp Act. So we have just been informed of the passage of the Stamp Act. And with the passage of the Stamp Act and the ability of the Parliament and the King to believe that they can tax us internally from without, tax us by people for whom we have not elected, is not only angering the people a great deal, but it's making us wonder, on coming as it does so closely after some terrible government overreach. It's made us wonder, is the government our friend or our enemy? So I had to go back and look at some old newspapers to remind myself of what happened, because it is 2 years ago and it did take a couple of years for this case to become resolved. So I checked back with some of Mr. Gaines' Weekly Gazette and Mr. Parker's Postboy, two different sides of the disagreement, we might say, in order to refresh my memory on exactly what happened in the case of Mr. Forsey versus Mr. Cunningham. Hi, Howie. It's nice to see you too. Thank you for joining us. Mr. White, also from Pennsylvania. So Mr. Forsey versus Mr. Cunningham. And this started out as a pretty simple, you know what? Don't want you seeing my chemise there. Maybe if I was a bit younger, I might not mind that. If I was a bit younger, I might want to attract you with a little bit of a view of my chemise, but I'm getting a little old for that. And besides, I am a married lady. So we'll pull this down and be a little bit more modest. If you don't know, mid-18th century jackets, dresses, gowns, everything are very, very low cut, right down to the top of the stays. So everything is kind of popped up above there. So if you want to be more modest, you'll have a scarf on, but some of the younger ladies are much more willing to show off their gifts to the younger men, as we might say. Oh, my dog Rex. Hello, Mr. Rex. It's great to see you again this week. So Mr. Forsey versus Mr. Cunningham. Mr. Forsey and Mr. Cunningham, both two very well-known gentlemen here in New York City, both merchants who had done business together many times. And Mr. Forsey took a loan from Mr. Cunningham, also not so unusual. Now, Mr. Cunningham's here in New York, but he represented a company based in South Carolina. So he's their agent here, well known to everyone. And it wasn't the first time they did business. The first time Mr. Forsey took a loan from Mr. Cunningham's company, and every time he paid them back. Well, Mr. Forsey had a little bit of difficulty repaying the loan, mainly because he was moving to Connecticut. And during that time, with the going back and forth and difficulties and complications involved, he was late in paying back the loan. So when he did come back to New York, Mr. Cunningham confronted him for the repayment of the loan. Mr. Forsey said he didn't have the cash, but he would be very happy to give him a note. A note meaning a banknote that he could take to the bank or take to whoever Mr. Forsey's financial representative was and cash in. Mr. Cunningham did not want this. He wanted cash. And the two men began to argue about this. And Mr. Forsey wanted to know why, after so many years of doing business in a friendly manner, that Mr. Cunningham was giving him such a difficult time. So Mr. Forsey wrote to Mr. Cunningham's partners in South Carolina, telling them exactly that. I've done business with you many times over the years. We've never had an issue. And suddenly, Mr. Cunningham is being very difficult about this debt, which you know I fully intend to repay. It's just that things have been happening in my life that have made it difficult for me to do so. But you know you can depend on me to pay the debt. And I would like an apology for the way I have been treated. So the gentleman in South Carolina wrote to Mr. Cunningham here, and Mr. Cunningham was extremely angry. And he confronted Mr. Forsey and said that he wanted Mr. Forsey to immediately go to the coffee house, sit down, and write a letter to his partners withdrawing his accusations that he had previously sent. And Mr. Cunningham refused to do so. The two men continued arguing over this for some time until one day in the street, Mr. Cunningham demanded that Mr. Forsey meet him the next day at the coffee house at noon to be horsewhipped because he had not repaid the loan. Mr. Forsey responded he would be glad to meet him the next day at the coffee house. Well, the next day at the coffee house, Mr. Forsey showed up with a horsewhip of his own to taunt Mr. Cunningham, who showed up with a sword under his coat. The two men got into a scuffle, and of course, both men claim something different happened in the scuffle. Mr. Forsey says Mr. Cunningham came at him first. Mr. Cunningham says Mr. Forsey knocked him, whipped him and knocked him to the ground. They both have different stories, but in essence, what happened was Mr. Cunningham stabbed Mr. Forsey with the sword, an 8-inch deep wound, which caused Mr. Forsey to nearly die. So while Mr. Forsey was recovering from his wound, well, hopefully recovering, no one could get an exact story of what happened because Mr. Forsey was too sick for quite a while to speak. But in the meantime, Mr. Cunningham was arrested, charged with assault with a deadly weapon, found guilty, and fined, I think it was 30 pounds fine, which he paid. Well, then Mr. Forsey fully recovered. I think the recovery took maybe 8 months. This is why this case went on for such a long time. Plus, as you'll find out, there's a lot of communication back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean, which you know takes weeks to work out. So at that time, Mr. Forsey hired lawyers and he sued Mr. Cunningham for damages. And he hired excellent lawyers, right? John Moran Scott. And on the other side, Mr. Cunningham, to defend him, had William Smith Jr., I don't remember which side Mr. Robert Livingston was one of the judges at the time. There's so many lawyers in New York, it's hard to keep them all straight. On the court was Mr. Robert Livingston, as well as William Smith Jr.'s father, Judge William Smith Sr., who you might remember was the judge in the John Peter Zenger trial 30 years before. So we have all of our New York lawyers always hovering around getting involved in these cases. And they sued Mr. Cunningham for 5,000 pounds damages in a civil trial. And the trial went off without any problems. A jury was selected without any objections from either side. Both cases argued their side. And in the end, I think the trial took about 10 hours, maybe a little bit over 2 days. And the jury deliberated and they found in favor for Mr. Forsey, but the damages that they set for Mr. Cunningham was 1,500 pounds, less than what they asked for. But Mr. Forsey and his lawyers were happy with the jury verdict. They said it was a good verdict. They accepted the damage settlement, and they felt that now the case was over, that Mr. Forsey just wanted some justice for what had been done to him. Unfortunately for them, Mr. Cunningham wanted to appeal the case. The only problem for Mr. Cunningham, as you might know, I think maybe even in your time, is that appeals can be based only on errors in trial. And there were no errors in the trial. The trial went along just fine, but they wanted to sue anyway. Now, this right of a jury's decision being appealed only on error dates back many hundreds of years. Some say that this originated with the original Saxon tribes. It certainly was and encoded in Magna Carta and then later in the British Constitution. This is a cornerstone of the British common law and protects the sanctity of jury verdicts. Otherwise, any official could just change a jury verdict, say, I don't like the jury verdict, have another trial. We're going to disregard this jury and we'll have another trial. So we can't do that, right? We have a right here in the colonies to the common law, and the common law says that you have a right to trial by jury and that jury trials can only be appealed on errors in legal procedure. So everyone believed the case was over. But Mr. Cunningham's private lawyer, along with a notary who he knew, tried to enter an appeal for the case. And when the appeal, of course, was refused by the judges, this is bother. I'm so fixated, right, on my looking proper all the time. Let me tell you all, this is my mother's fault, as my mother sent me when I was a girl to Mrs. Talavera's etiquette class. And from that time on, I have been overly obsessed with the perfection of my appearance and my public manners. So this is all Mrs. C's fault for doing this to me. And I'll just give you a hint that that is a true story from my modern life, that my mother in the 18th century and in the 20th century was worried that I was too much of a tomboy and sent me to etiquette classes. And that is what absolutely makes me so fastidious about my appearance in both time periods, just to let you know a little about me personally. So anyway, all of the lawyers refused to accept the appeal. They all quit on both sides because they said an appeal can only be on a point of procedural law. Now, somehow, Mr. Cunningham's personal lawyer and his notary presented a document they claimed was from England and was from the king's lawyers. And that this document ordered the governor, Cadwallader Colden, always causing problems for this colony since before I was born, Mr. Colden, presented it to Mr. Colden that the trial should have an appeal. Now, everyone thought this was very strange that the king's lawyers themselves would overturn hundreds of years of common law practice. So it was quite a bit of discussion over the legitimacy of this letter. Well, the letter was taken to Mr. Colden, and Mr. Colden is not a lawyer, he is a scientist and a royalist, a very dedicated royalist, and truly believes in the ultimate power of the king to do however he pleases. First he asked the royal attorney general here in the colony, Attorney General Kemper, and he refused. He said, this is an abomination. We can't do this. This overrules hundreds of years of right to trial by jury. If you do this, you are taking away this gentleman's right to a trial by jury. You can't do this, and I won't be a part of this. Well, Colden insisted that the attorney general write a procedure for him to move forward on this, even though the attorney general refused to have a part of it. So he refused to be a part of it himself. Colden then called together the justices on the court, who were equally appalled, right? Equally appalled. Mr. Livingston, Mr. Horsemenden, Mr. Smith, all appalled that they would be asked to do something like this, all fine and respected lawyers. Well, this went on for some time with a number of letters going back and forth between England and New York, and Colden insisting on having an appeal of this trial, and Colden saying that he had the right himself to order the appeal because the king had granted the appeal. And of course, he sits at the pleasure of the king. And this became extremely terrible, with letters back and forth in the newspapers, arguments in the street, fighting in the streets over this, physical altercations over this. And it went on until earlier this year, almost 2 years before this was solved, when a letter arrived from the court, written by the court lawyers, upholding what the gentleman here said, that this was an outrageous misinterpretation of the right to appeal, that an appeal can only be granted when there's an error in trial procedure. That appeals cannot be granted because someone doesn't like the jury verdict or out of favor, because that would then deny a subject of the crown their right to a jury trial. And it also said that the jury trial is one of the foundations of a subject's rights under the common law. And the case was at last settled. Although I don't know if Mr. Cunningham ever paid that $1,500 judgment. He may not have. So right on the heels of everyone being up in arms over Governor Colden attempting himself to overrule the right to a jury trial or the right for a jury verdict to stand, other than through an error in legal procedure, we get the stamp tax, which is the Parliament now telling us that they have the right to tax us internally, although we don't elect them. So there's much talk now around the city that the government is indeed every day becoming more and more our enemy and is less and less there to protect us and support us. And I wonder what you all think about that. The stamp tax requires us to pay a tax on all paper goods and other types of items that we use in the colonies, and the tax goes directly back to England. The stamp tax is supposedly to pay for troops that have remained here after the French Indian War or 7 Years' War. That itself is a controversial item as well. Many believe that the soldiers have been stationed here after the war, not to protect us from the French or the Indians, but to be tools of the governors to frighten and oppress us, and to keep us from protesting and disagreeing with the government. So many believe that the soldiers are now an occupying force to intimidate us. And so we do not want to pay for them. Now, there also is a question of whether the Parliament can raise this tax at all, as this is an internal tax, internal to us in the colonies. It taxes us for something we are doing here. And as British subjects, we have the right to be taxed internally for revenue only by people for whom we elect. And now all of the debate has started over this. Do they have the right to tax us or not? Now, the Parliament claims that they are virtual representation to everyone in the British Empire. So although we don't elect them, they virtually represent us. And I don't think that idea is doing very well here. I don't think that idea is going to do very well, that they virtually represent us, but we'll see how it proceeds over the coming weeks and months. They also claim not only do they provide virtual representation, but if we look at the House of Commons itself, we will see that there are parts of England that do not have representation in the House of Commons. That all of the House of Commons represents all of the people of England. Therefore, virtually, by connection, that means they represent all of us as well, because not everyone in England gets to vote for someone in the Parliament, but they still must abide by the decisions and lawmaking Parliament. So there's a great deal of argument going on about this. Now, there's some other interesting things that have been found in the Stamp Act by people who've read the whole act. Now, one of the things it does is, in order for all of the taxes to be levied on all of these different items, everything from playing cards to paper for letters, even for me, ship manifests, any business documents I sign, legal documents, of course, all of the newspapers, broadsides, pamphlets, diplomas, everything will be on taxed paper, right? All of that paper will be taxed. It has at least starting to unite all of the different classes here in America. Never before have the lawyers and the merchants and the gentlemen farmers, as they're called, been on the same footing against the crown as the dock workers, the farmers, the shipbuilders, the blacksmiths, and everyone else, because everyone now is going to have to pay the tax. So the tax is uniting everyone. It is flattening everyone economically into the same group. So everyone will have to pay this tax. So now we see a little bit of uniting between the people of the different economic groups, which I think will have some interesting ramifications in the future. It also sets up a massive bureaucracy for the tax. Someone has to be in charge of distributing all of the stamped paper. Someone has to make sure that taxes are paid when the paper is sold. Someone has to enforce the penalties if someone isn't using stamped paper, collect the penalties. Someone has to collect the taxes, keep all of the paperwork and the bookkeeping, and make sure everything is sent properly to England, where there also is a bureaucracy set up to handle it on the other end. So, does most of the money from the Stamp Act go to supporting a government bureaucracy and simply paying off more government employees? How much of it actually is reserved for the Army? And how would we even know? I don't think we would. I don't think there's any way to know, as the Stamp Act just says, that monies will be used in order to set up and maintain this bureaucracy. The next question is, who in their right mind would possibly accept the role as stamp agent? Who would ever take that job to be the person in charge of administering the Stamp Act? I don't think I know anyone who would be willing to take that job in such dangerous times as these. So there may also be a problem just getting men to serve as the stamp agent. Also embedded in the Stamp Act is a little piece that says that any money that remains after paying for the employees, the bureaucracy, paying for the soldiers, any money left over will go into the Parliament's sinking fund. And the sinking fund is a fund which the Parliament can spend in any way they please, which means now the Parliament is taking money from us to spend however they like without having to tell us even how it's spent. That makes it a revenue tax. And as I said, the lawyers here in town, especially Mr. Livingston, has said that we can only be taxed for revenue with consent. Therefore, this is taxation without representation, and the tax surely is illegal. As you can see, coming right on the back of Forsey versus Cunningham and Mr. Colden's overreach there, everyone is quite upset about the Stamp Act. Oh, Mrs. Healy says, how despicable. Indeed, Mrs. Healy, despicable and tyrannical. Have you seen such tyrannical behavior on the part of the Crown? Now, I do think that it was not too long ago that Mr. Patrick Henry in Virginia argued a similar case, and that he argued that the Virginia House of Burgesses, the Virginia legislature, could not be overruled by the Board of Trade in London, which tried to overrule them. He argued for, I think, 1 hour in a courtroom. He was threatened with being charged with treason. And he continued to argue that it was tyranny for the Board of Trade in London to overrule the House of Burgesses. So we have that case, and I'm sure that the Stamp Act is not going to sit well with the people of Virginia, although it's so soon that we've heard of the Stamp Act ourselves here. We have not yet heard anything from Virginia, but I'm sure that Mr. Henry is not happy about it. No one is going to be happy about it. The case of Forsey versus Cunningham was popularized throughout the colonies. Everyone heard about it and learned about Governor Colden. Now, Mr. Colden claims that the stamp paper will be coming and we will abide by the Stamp Act. And the commander of Fort George, Major James, in the course of a protest a few days ago at the fort, said that the people will take the stamps or we will force them down their throats. Can you believe such a thing? How do you think the gentlemen here are going to react to that? Do you think Major James may have some difficult times ahead for himself Indeed, I think he might. Oh, we have some more comments. I love it. Was that happening in all the colonies? The Stamp Act from Mr. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, how good of you to join me tonight, Mr. Franklin. I haven't seen you in so long. It is a pleasure. The spark to ignite a revolution. Exactly. And Mr. Franklin, I believe when you warned them in England that the Stamp Act would unite the colonies against them, that they laughed at you. They laughed at you, sir, and they said that we would never unite, that we had nothing in common, and all we did was argue and bicker with each other. Mr. White, I believe both Mr. Wilkes and Mr. Barre were not in agreement with this act. Absolutely, Mr. White. Mr. John Wilkes, Mr. Isaac Barre, Mr. Pitt himself, Lord Chatham, William Pitt, leader of England's Whigs, was against it. Many of the Whigs against it. I think Mr. Burke is against it as well. So this is not something that is popular, even in the Parliament. It is a desperate attempt for the Crown to make up the debt they incurred fighting the French here, and what likely was an unnecessary and useless war, now wanting us to pay their debts. As Mr. Smith has said, Mr. Adam Smith, I hope you've heard of him in your time. As Mr. Smith has said, he sits around in many parlors listening to the elite of London talk about their wars of empire and how great the wars make the empire and how happy they are to have fought them and how strong it makes them feel. He says, but these elite people, these aristocrats, do not fight the wars, neither do they pay for the wars. He says it would be impossible to pay for the wars at the time they're fought. He says, so instead, we take loans for the wars, and then we charge future generations to pay off the loans. He said, because the people currently would never endure taxes high enough to pay for all of these wars. So we leave it to our children and our grandchildren to pay for the wars, which is what they're doing here now, asking us to pay for their war. Some brilliant thinking on the part of Mr. Smith, I think. Mr. Linden says it sounds much like the Irish reaction to Wood's happenings 40 years before. You see, these are not new reactions to actions taken by the Parliament. More and more, the Parliament seems to be a body whose only interest is in exploiting the people over whom they govern, or at least this is what we're saying here in New York. And someone asked me, is this happening in all the colonies? Andrea, yes, it is. From New England to Georgia, everyone is upset about the Stamp Act, and it is the first thing that is going to unite us as one entity. Prior to Forsey versus Cunningham and the Stamp Act and some other things that have happened, the colonies, we have always been like separate little countries here. Each of us with our own governments, our own economies, our own currencies, our own ways of doing things, our own traditions, and our own religions. Never really seeing anything in common with each other, and often competing with each other, not only for territory, but for business in the Caribbean, competing in trade. But this, it seems, is going to unite us for the very first time, as we have found something we dislike more than we dislike each other, the Stamp Act. And that was a rather remarkable thing for the Parliament to achieve, to get us in the colonies to dislike something more than each other. And I think Mr. Franklin warned them this very thing would happen. We have Mr. Linden. He says, when Wood threatened to make them swallow his coins in balls of wildfire and was ridiculed by Swift. Oh, Mr. Swift, what a fine man. Mr. Jonathan Swift, of who everyone should read, who has written some of the greatest satirical works about the crown and the aristocracy ever to have been put on paper. Maybe one night we'll talk about Mr. Swift and his great work. And now my knot is not centered. Am I driving you crazy with my obsession with perfection here? This is I make Mr. Q crazy whenever he helps me dress, and I have to move this and move that, and Mr. Q has to adjust this for me and adjust that. But I do have a reputation to uphold. After all, if I were to go into my shop and present what I'm wearing as an example to my lady customers, and I don't look perfect, they'll be less likely to want to buy any fabrics or accessories I want to sell them. So therefore, this is important to me, not only personally, but also professionally, that I look very nice all the time. Mr. Swift, as I said, was a genius, and everyone should read Mr. Jonathan Swift. Oh, maybe you've read his story, Gulliver's Travels, but you may have only read it as a child's story. You know, Governor's Travels is not a child's story. It is a satire of the nations of Europe. So perhaps you should read it again with a mind to that. Or find a version that has notes in it that explains the politics in there. I know in your time it's very difficult because it was written 300 years before you, a little bit difficult for you to understand who and what he's talking about. But if you find a version that has notes in it, you may find it very interesting to read more as a political satire of England and Europe than as a child's story of a gentleman traveling through magical and distant lands. So I encourage you to maybe take another look at it. And then, of course, there was his brilliant pamphlet, or broadside, I should say, A Modest Proposal, where Mr. Swift proposed to the Parliament and the aristocrats of England that since they were complaining there were too many orphans and there wasn't enough food for the poor, well, why don't we just eat the orphans? Why don't we just eat the orphans? And that will solve both of our problems. We'll have fewer orphans and we'll have food for the poor. So the great Jonathan Swift, please take a look at him. He is very popular in my time. Still, we all read Jonathan Swift. So I'm wondering what is going to happen over the coming weeks and months as this progresses with the Stamp Act, and I will keep you appraised of the happenings here. I have a feeling this is not going to go well for the Crown. It's quite stunning to see the colonies communicating with each other. We've never done that before. You know, when we have a problem with New Jersey or with Pennsylvania, which occurs often, or with New England over our border there, and who who has Vermont? Does Vermont belong to New York or does Vermont belong to Massachusetts? Who knows? We argue over that all the time. We even have militia fighting there with each other over that border. Isn't it miraculous that we would start talking to each other? When we would solve these problems or have these problems before, we in New York will write to our agent in London, who would then speak to the agent of the other colony. For instance, if it was New York and Pennsylvania, Mr. Burke represented us most recently. Maybe Mr. Burke would then speak to Mr. Franklin, and they would try to work out the problem between New York and Pennsylvania, and then they would send the solution to the problem back to us. I know that sounds absurd to you, but that is the way it has always been done until now, when the gentlemen of the colonies are now writing and communicating with each other, right? So Mr. Livingston, the lawyer in New York, writes to the lawyer James Otis in Massachusetts and the lawyer Patrick Henry in Virginia, and all of the lawyers now start uniting against the Stamp Act. And I think it just might be possible that ship captains will do the same, as while I have been on the docks examining my goods that are coming in, I overhear the ship captains talking about joining with other ship captains along the coast and refusing to bring in the stamps paper. So I've been hearing that. I've been hearing rumors from other merchants of perhaps refusing to trade with England over the Stamp Act. These are all things I've been hearing about possibilities of what we might do to fight back against the Stamp Act. So we'll see where all of this goes as spring and summer approach in the year 1765. So I am so happy to have seen you all tonight. If you have any additional questions, please stick them in the chat. It doesn't have to be about what we discussed tonight. It could be anything. Or if you have a topic you would like me to talk about in future Mrs. Q Live, you can put it in there as well. And I will be happy to address your topic. I'm always looking for interesting things to talk about. But I hope you'll keep in mind the importance of Forsey versus Cunningham and the foundational importance of the sanctity of a jury trial, that no official or judge ought to be able to overrule the verdict in a jury trial or demand an appeal or grant an appeal unless there is an error in the trial procedure. Otherwise, the jury trial means nothing. No, and I have heard that in your time in the future, of course, you have a new government from ours, everything, that you have an amendment to your Constitution. I think it might be number 7 that talks about that. The importance guarantees the right of a jury trial in all civil disputes of $20 or more. I think you have that. You might want to look that up. And where did that come from? It came from my time, Horsey versus Cunningham, and Governor Cadwallader Colden's attempt to grant an appeal when there was no error in the trial. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you got some of my connections between my time and yours, which is what I try to do every week. And I hope you do have a wonderful week until I see you again next Thursday. Remember, Sunday night, you can hear my modern self, my 21st century self on Republic Broadcasting Network. That's republicbroadcasting.org from 9 to 11 p.m. I'm not sure what I'll be talking about this week, but I do talk about topics and relate them to the 21st century and try to help you see the connections between that time and this time. And some of you might know that my theme song for that show is the Isley Brothers song, Fight the Power, because the reason we study the American Revolution, the reason I talk to you as Mrs. Q from the 18th century is that so you can learn how the people of the 18th century fought against corrupt criminal government, fought the power, so that you might have some ideas about how to do the same in your time. So thank you very much for joining me. You're welcome, Linda. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Stephanie says, it is interesting that the Stamp Act brought the colonies together. Maybe in our time, the tariff thing that's going on now may bring the people in the USA together. Who knows what the item will be? We never considered that something like the Stamp Act would unite the colonies. We never thought the Stamp Act would ever happen. So we'll see how England handles that. But it's always important to remember, I think, something that we are learning here, that your neighbors, although they may be different from you, or the other colonies, although they may be different, although they may have a different religion, the people might come from a different place, they may have different traditions and languages. The fellow people are not your enemy. It's beginning to look to us in 1765 that the government is the enemy, not our neighbors. And we'll see how long it takes the people of the American colonies to thoroughly understand that. Well, Mr. White says, well done. Thank you for the compliment, sir. It means a lot to me. So everyone have a wonderful night. Good night. And I hope you're all well. And I'll see you all next week, Mrs. Q Live, here in my home in Hanover Square, New York.